to an American Talk Show. I'm your host, David Allard. I'm an attorney in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. On the show today, we have Kenny Carrabba and Stephen Femino. They're our guests, and we're grateful to have them with us today. They're people like yourselves, ordinary citizens with views and opinions about what's happening in gun control and gun control legislation. That's a big issue across the country. It's a very controversial issue. We're going to get into some of the laws regarding gun control legislation, but the most important thing is what the public thinks about it, because the public is the driving force behind the laws in this country. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, Kenny, first. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Kenneth Carrabba. I am living in Fitchburg, Mass. I was born and raised in that city. Fitchburg High School graduate, and I'm 44 years old.
And Steve, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Steve Femino. I'm a licensed electrician. I'm a small business owner, and I grew up in the small town of Barry, Massachusetts, and that's it.
Steve, we'll start with you. What would your position be with regard to guns and gun control legislation?
I think that people should be able to, if they're good citizens and they have not committed any crimes or whatnot, I think they should be able to obtain a FID card or license to carry, as long as they're decent citizens. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to obtain something like that.
Well, why should we allow people to have guns when they can go into schools and shoot children like that incident in Newtown? Why do we need guns?
To protect just everyday people. You need to have the rights to be able to do that, because if you didn't, you'll have people like what happened in Connecticut, which was a very, detrimental thing to everybody. But
well, what would happen if we banned guns altogether?
We wouldn't have any more rights, and the government could take over, and all sorts of crazy chaos could happen, and we'd have no defense to stay together if we needed to, even just in small towns, small communities, small colonies, or whatever, to protect ourselves if we needed to do that. If you banned them from the public people, yeah, because the criminals would always have them. They'd be able to obtain them. They're only affecting the people that are law-abiding citizens, and the people that would probably have them would be criminals and the police and military. That would probably be it.
Kenny, how do you feel about that? What's your position with regard to gun legislation that bans guns?
I believe every person, in this case the United States, that's where I live, should be allowed to own a gun as long as you register the gun where legally it's attached to your name, so if that gun is used, whether it's wrongly or not, they can find out what you're doing with your gun. The criminals are going to use the guns that they're buying anyways, because they're obviously not registering guns. They're going to use crimes with it. So like Steve said, criminals are going to get guns no matter what, which means guns are always going to be used wrong, even if they put a restriction on them, because every study that I looked at shows that if you have gun control, crime actually doesn't change. It actually, I think it goes up.
So if you ban guns, you don't think that would accomplish the goal of avoiding mass shootings?
No, it does not at all. Every study supports differently than that. The state of Vermont has gun control. They have one of the safest states in the United States.
And we'll get into that a little bit later, but 6,583 people were killed with guns in 2011 based on the FBI statistics. Why don't you think a ban on guns would reduce or eliminate a lot of those deaths, homicides?
Because the people that are using the guns for things like murder or school shootings are not legally buying those guns, or they're using a gun from someone else. So a ban on guns doesn't stop people from committing these acts of violence. That's what I believe.
And Steve, do you hold similar views on that?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
So you feel that if there was an outright ban, the criminals would still be able to get the guns?
Oh, I think it would be, yeah, they'd be able to get the guns and there'd be more chaos. Because they would know that they could go into basically any house that they wanted to, if they chose to, and break in and do whatever they needed to do, whether they're hurting people or stealing or theft or anything like that. And people go into like certain, like community that I live in now, Oakham, Massachusetts, we have one of the safest areas. I mean, we still have break-ins, but, you know, we have a high amount of people that have guns, so you don't see a lot of people breaking into the areas. I mean, compared to like the cities or other places. But if they were to ban that, it could be really crazy. You know, could be chaotic.
Let's talk a little bit about a semi-automatic gun. And a semi-automatic gun is a self-loading gun. Why should you have self-loading guns? Why do we need semi-automatic guns?
I'll talk with you, Steve, first.
When you say semi-automatic, or you mean full automatic?
Semi-automatic. A semi-automatic is
Semi-automatic, you just pull the trigger.
it's a self-loading. It does all the necessary steps.
Which is what the police
To reload.
Oh,
use
okay, I see
on
what you mean.
duty.
Yeah, okay.
So why do we need semi-automatic guns?
It's preference. It's all preference. Some people they have some people are hunters and they're handicapped and they have a harder time, so they have automatics. People like to do range firing. They have automatics for that. I mean,
Well, wouldn't that be more dangerous with regard to mass shootings in schools? Why do we need to have automatic loading guns?
why do we need to? I don't really think there's no need for it, but it's just like a preference. It's like, do you need power windows in your car? No, but people like to have the convenience.
People, I think it's because people want to buy a gun. They don't want it to be complicated. Like Steve says, would you buy a car if it took you an hour to figure out how you're going to drive it once you started driving it?
What do you feel? How do you feel, Steve, if there were legislation banning automatic guns or semi-automatic guns?
I wouldn't agree with it. I don't.
Why is that?
I think that if you're a gun owner and you follow the right procedures, I don't think there should be limitations. I mean, I can't say people should have Uzis and have like 100, rounds capacity in their gun. I think that's a little excessive, but I don't see anything wrong with automatics. I have an automatic, and I think it's fine. It's all under the discretion. But obviously, what happened in Connecticut, I mean, some people are saying if they would have had less rounds, that maybe there would have been less casualties. Nobody knows. And that was an isolated incident, and it should have never happened. But it does happen, and it's just not much we can do about that. But whether you have a bolt action, a single fire, you're still gonna do the same thing. It's under who is actually using the weapon, if you want to call it that.
So even if it wasn't an automatic gun, if it was a
Yeah.
They still would have killed. You tell me. Somebody says, okay, if they would have had not was it an assault rifle, they would have had shotguns. You're telling me that a shotgun with buckshot, okay, is not going to do the things that stuff does? Well, anybody that knows anything about guns, you get an assault rifle, yes, you can fire a lot of rounds, but they're individual rounds. You get a shotgun with buckshot, it scatters. You can do volume with that if you know what I mean. If you really want to get down to bare bones about it,
How about pistols? Could you do the same thing with pistols?
No, well, they don't have a pistol shotgun, but they have the pistols that right. They have revolver style, or they have a semi-automatic, and they have the Uzis, which most people can't get an Uzi. That's a special license altogether.
So even single-shot weapons could someone could still do mass killings even with a.
Yeah, I mean,
weapons.
we obviously with a single shot, you're not going to have the volume. There's no way you're not going to have the volume.
Although if you load and fire fast,
True.
or if you have multiple guns.
But somebody could go in there. This would be you could go into that school with knives, and you could just keep going. And you're telling me that you're not going to kill people with a knife? So you know what I mean? It's all the person shouldn't have been able to obtain a gun. That's the problem. And somebody should have been more alert on that or been more secure. But I mean, you can hurt anybody with basically anything if you really try. You know what I mean? That's what it comes down to.
Kenny, I'll address this to you. Why can't we trust the police to protect us if we have problems?
Well, I don't know what you mean. I mean, the police protect you. It's their job. But if someone was going to break into your house and you were home, you don't have time to call the police if they're intending to rob you or kill you. So if you have a gun, you can protect yourself. If you wait for the police to get there, it could take 10 minutes or more, and even if it took 5 minutes is a matter of life and death. So you should have a right to own a gun if your reason is to protect yourself. The reason why cops have guns on them is for the same reason why I want one, in case I need it to protect myself. If a cop goes to a crime scene, and let's say someone's doing, killing people, like at a school, do the cops go to the school without a gun? Of course they don't. Well, the same sense, that's why I want a gun. I'll go back to something that you asked that I want to hit on. Okay, cops have guns because they need to carry it for their job. 99.9% of people who buy guns do not use them for things like murder or any bad act of violence. In the same sense, most police officers, it's almost 99.5% again, will tell you they never use their gun. Sometimes 20, 30 years will go by and they do not use guns. But yet, the U.S. government wants people to believe that there's a very, very bad problem with guns. And every time there's a school shooting, they'll use this as a way to convince the public to say, oh wow, we must have a big, big gun problem in America. But the statistics don't show that there's a lot of killings. It's only when there are killings where I think the government makes more out of something that's not really there.
Yeah, and we might as well take up that issue now. England, for example, has an outright ban on guns. In fact, even carrying scissors in your pocketbook is a concealed weapon. And we talked about the fact that there were 6,000, or the exact figure, 6,583 people that were killed in the United States with handguns. England doesn't have a lot of people killed by handguns. However, if you make England a state in the United States, if you made it the 51st state, a fellow wrote an article about that where he said England being the 51st state would have a murder rate or homicide rate higher than several states in the United States. It'd be higher than Vermont, it'd be higher than Iowa, higher than Hawaii, higher than New Hampshire, and close to several other states.
When you say higher, you mean higher based on the population of, like say, Vermont?
A number of homicides, per 100,000 people. So, but instead of doing it with guns, they would do it with strangulation, baseball bats, poison, knives, various other ways that they.
So they have other resources, you're saying?
They have other ways
To still keep.
of committing the crime. And here's the article right here. It's by Richard Carey, December 22nd, 2012. He said, UK murder rate higher than some states. And he charts the states and indicates that several of our states, the crime rate, murder rate is much lower. And if we take Vermont, for example, in their gun legislation, Vermont has probably the most lenient requirements with regard to guns. There are no requirements with regard to getting a permit. In Vermont, for example, you do not need a permit to purchase a gun. Unlike Massachusetts, you need an FID to purchase a gun. You don't need there's no firearm registration, there's no assault weapon law, there's no owner license required, there's no permit to carry required. There's virtually no requirements for for guns in Vermont, but yet their crime rate is down and their murder rate is lower than England. The article in the Health News, it's called Health News. It's an article written by Deborah Kotz and Brian McCourt in the Globe. I guess it's in the Boston Globe. They indicated that the governor, as well as a state representative, David Linsky. State Representative David Linsky is a native Democrat who's filed a bill to tighten the Massachusetts gun laws even further. It's become very clear that those states with stronger gun violence prevention laws have lower firearm death rates. But what does that mean? Because as we see in England, if they're not killed by guns, they could be killed
with something else.
Knives,
Yeah.
strangulation, baseball, poison, baseball bats, poison, many other ways of killing people.
Crimes are still going to be committed one way or the other. That's what it amounts down to. If you have criminals, there's going to be crime. That's all there is to it. And you're going to, what you're saying there, you're going to put all these pressures and against people that are good citizens, that are law-abiding citizens, and you're going to penalize them and make the laws even stricter. So, they shouldn't even have them anymore. The way they're saying it, and that's not going to effectively increase or decrease the crime rate.
Right. And Linsky's bill, by the way, would require gun owners to purchase liability insurance. It require better access to mental health records, a 25% sales tax on guns and ammunition to be funneled into mental health services, and close a loophole with regard to military-style weapons manufactured before 1994, when the state banned such guns. What do you think about that, Steve? What do you think, taking those one at a time, what do you think about, how would it affect you as a gun owner with regard to having to now purchase liability insurance?
That's another expense. The economy's terrible as it is now. How, and so now it gets into the economy, now you're affecting more expense. It's just, that's unnecessary. I don't see the purpose of it. It doesn't have any, who is it benefiting? Really? Is it the states are going to get more money, more revenue because of that? And that's all? That's all it's going to do? It's not actually going to keep the guns off the street. The criminals aren't going to be penalized with this tax, just the law-abiding citizens.
I think that's just a way the government to make it harder for you to attain a gun. It's them accomplishing to do anything they can to stop you from owning a gun, and they know this could work for them.
And Kenny, what do you think about the fact that they want to hike up a 25% sales tax on guns and ammunition?
Once again, it comes down to, if they make it economically harder for people to buy anything, whether it's a gun or not, then they are going to accomplish whatever they can accomplish. I don't think they care about the fact that there's going to be money involved. They're trying to do whatever they can to stop me from owning a gun, and I should not lose my right to own a gun because one of my fellow Americans or someone didn't use a gun correctly. It would be like I would tell the president or any gun advocate, I'll stop owning a gun if you stop driving your car. Okay, the question is, what does driving a car have to do with owning a gun? Well, there are by far more people killed in the United States in car accidents, whether it's from a drunk driver or a regular accident, than guns. And I don't see the government or Barack Obama stopping people from driving a car because it's reasonable sense. Obama would agree with me. I should not lose my right to drive a car because someone killed somebody in a car accident. Well, so then why are you trying to take away my right to own a gun? I shouldn't lose my right to own a gun because someone went out and killed somebody at a school in Connecticut.
And I'd like to read you guys something. The Second Amendment, which is a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And when you see this proposal about a 25% sales tax on guns and ammunition, don't you see this now, Steve, as infringing on or impairing your ability to exercise your Second Amendment right?
Absolutely. The government's slowly creeping in on their way to slow down the process of people purchasing and obtaining ammunition. That's basically what they're doing.
I'm going to read you a quote from Chief Justice John Marshall, Supreme Court in 1819. He said the power to tax involves the power to destroy. The power to destroy may defeat and render useless the power to create. So his interpretation would be putting a tax right here, 25%, would be the power to destroy somebody's ability to protect themselves. Somebody's Second Amendment right, because they didn't have the money to pay the 25% sales tax. It actually is impinging on their rights now to defend themselves.
That's right.
Let's take the second part of this proposal, suggesting that there should be access to mental health records. How do you think, Steve, that would have impacted the situation down in Newtown or in general? What do you think the government should do with regard to accessing mental health records in order for people to get a gun?
Well, going back to the incident down in Connecticut, which you started to refer to, was his mother, I guess, was a law-abiding citizen, had the guns. I don't know how he got them, but obviously they found that there was a mental history there. So maybe it would have caught, maybe it would have been caught, but he didn't have the right to have any of those guns. He was considered the criminal, you know, even though he was a young kid, but he didn't have the rights to obtain that stuff, and he got it somehow. Killed his mother, possibly killed his brother. And the other part, could you refer back to that?
Well, what do you think about
The notion that the government should be requiring getting mental health access to your records to determine whether or not you should have a gun.
I think that's violating my rights. And into the HIPAA Act, you're not even supposed to, you know what I mean, that's supposed to be confidential between you and your doctor. I mean, and who's to say that doctor is credible to evaluate me as a person?
Right.
What do you think? Okay.
Same thing, if I can add to what he said. Let's say I went into a doctor's office and he evaluated my mental health. He's going to ask me questions. He's going to make a determination, not on anything really about me. It's based on my answers. I could be smart enough, or anybody could be smart enough, to tell him what he wants to hear, where his evaluation could very well be wrong. So no doctor is going to be able to evaluate anybody to know if they're insane enough to own a gun. Because there's people who have owned guns that people thought were sane that committed horrible acts with guns. Timothy McVeigh is a perfect example.
So you're saying that no doctor would be able to predict your
No.
person's actions?
No, doctors are not God. No doctor is going to be able to figure out if someone's insane or sane enough to own a gun. I think this is just ludicrous that the government thinks that this is something they want to do. It doesn't have any sense to it.
And Steve, what about the idea if they required to know what kind of prescription medication you're taking before deciding whether or not to give you a permit to own a gun?
That goes, I don't know. I guess if you're on a limited, maybe there are certain prescriptions maybe that aren't a good judgment for a person to be obtaining a gun at that time or be able to use it. It's just like driving. If you have a certain medication, they recommend that you don't drive because you might have side effects, and it could go the same way. So I can understand that, okay? But you're opening a whole can of worms here now. And
Right.
you know, we don't know what it's going to come down to. I mean, you could run from one little question to phenomenal things that, you know, we're not even sure if we even get into that yet. And it could just progressively get worse and get beyond what we actually initially started to work with or for.
Well, what if so let's be specific. What if the state were to say, you, Steve, are not eligible to have a gun permit if you are on this, that, or the other kind of medication?
I would have no recourse. I would have to fall under that law. Or that,
Would you agree with a law like that?
no, absolutely not. No, I don't.
So you don't agree with a law that would say if you're using this particular prescription, you cannot get a gun?
Well, let's go back into it. So are they going to bring this law into place?
So if they enacted legislation that said if you are being prescribed this kind of psychotropic medication or this kind of drug, you should not or cannot get a gun permit. Would you be in favor of that?
Yeah, that would probably be okay.
Right.
Kenny?
Yeah, I agree. But that's a tough issue. If
Not,
someone's on medication, and they're on medication obviously because they have mental health issues, and they've obviously have been known to be on this have mental health issues for X amount of years, then yes, by all means, that person could be questioned to own a gun. But I think the issue with the government is not really this. This is just a way for them to find resources to do something to stop you from owning a gun. I mean,
Well, let's be very clear about this. If the state says, because of our safety concerns, if you are undertaking prescribed to take these particular drugs, then you are not allowed to have a gun. Are you for that or against that, Steve?
well, if the doctor says that this type of medication and it has a side effect and there could be possibilities, and you could say like some people might see, like hear things and whatnot, absolutely, we don't want people like that having a gun or that right to have one at that time.
But
Didn't we all agree not that long ago that you can't predict such actions?
Well, you can't if they're not on the medication. But if they're on medication, they've already been, obviously they're taking medication for a reason, I would assume.
so you're saying the
Doctors can predict.
Yeah, but that's before.
in that instance, yes. Right. In that instance, they can. But I believe that they're assuming that if I was interviewed and I have no history of any mental health, then a doctor shouldn't be able to decide at that moment, well, yeah, maybe this guy down the road could commit an act of using a gun wrongly. Because I'm not on any medication. So it's a tough issue. If someone's on medication, I would hope and pray the doctor would have significant proof to show that this medication affects the way this person thinks mentally, where they could be a danger to society. The question is, are you a danger to society if you own a gun?
So again, it sounds to me like you're leaving it up to a doctor to make a determination whether or not you have a Second Amendment right. Because the doctor is going to say, well, I prescribed this medication. And the doctor is going to protect himself. And he's going to say, well, anybody taking a hallucinogenic or some anti-psychotropic drug is, he could go off.
And right, see, I see your concern. The concern you have is what I would agree to. If a doctor can do that, or say that for one person, then you could say that for anybody.
right?
And that's what could happen. You could say,
Yeah.
And in fact, thousands, millions of people are prescribed antipsychotic drugs, anti-anxiety drugs daily.
Mm-hmm.
So are those guys not to have a Second Amendment right anymore?
right, so,
And then what happens? What happens then? Maybe they say, well, I better stop taking my drugs because if I'm under prescription,
Then I can't have.
I can't have a gun.
Right.
And we don't want that either. No, it does open up a whole thing.
so then
Guess
what do you
what?
say about Linsky's bill where he says he wants mental health records and he wants to determine whether or not have a doctor determine whether or
I
not you
still
should have a
think
Second Amendment
a
right.
doctor cannot fully know if you're insane or sane enough to own a gun. And the reason why is because every evaluation a doctor does is based on what or the client tells that doctor. So if everything the doctor believes about you is based on what you tell him, and he doesn't know if you're telling the truth or not, there can never be an accurate evaluation. I'm saying as far as mental health to own a gun. I'm not saying the doctor can't be correct about his reading. Sometimes they are. But
We don't want to give the doctors
You-
the right. Yeah.
you can't give a doctor a power to decide something because he could, more times than not, be incorrect about his evaluation.
So isn't it true then if you give the doctors that power, thousands of people on medication legitimately would either stop taking their medication or would be given no opportunity to get a gun to defend themselves?
That's right.
So I guess
Right.
it comes right down to, I guess we don't want the doctors evaluating us. You know, we don't want that, right? Just hopefully that, like if I had to take medication, I would hope that I would be able to figure out that, okay, you know, I'm on the medication, I shouldn't drive, or I shouldn't use a gun, I shouldn't do anything that's unsafe, I shouldn't climb a ladder, I shouldn't do a lot of things, if that's what it takes, you know, if that's the side effects from the doctor that gave me the medication.
Doesn't it come down to people being responsible for themselves?
Basically, yes, that's what I was saying. Yeah, you have to. The person's gonna have to decide on his own, common sense, and decide that, you know, okay, look, I shouldn't be on this because I shouldn't be on a ladder. I shouldn't be driving a car. Or yeah, basically, just common sense, and you should be able to.
Now, Governor Deval Patrick has filed gun control legislation too, and his bill, which includes some of the provisions in Alinsky's bill, would limit gun purchases to 1 firearm a month, create 4 new categories of firearms, and also seeks to have electronic monitoring of private gun sales. And doing this by requiring that they occur at a business of a licensed dealer. Steve, how do you feel about that?
I don't like it. I don't think they need to do that. I think what we do. I think the guidelines that we currently have now, I think, are adequate.
Well, why would it be advantageous to limit gun purchases to 1 firearm a month? How does that help us?
It doesn't, because so somebody goes out and buys a gun that month. Okay, he's still got. If they're gonna, it's only affecting the people that are in the system, that are you know, good citizens, law-abiding citizens. It doesn't affect the criminals, because they can probably buy, if they got the money, they can probably buy 100 guns a day necessary. You know what I mean? It doesn't really work for what they're trying to prove.
And Kenny, how about the notion of him creating 4 new categories of firearm crimes? Does that accomplish anything?
No.
And why is that?
Same thing Steve said. Why are they putting limitations on now what you can own for guns? The Second Amendment wasn't written to say that you have a right to bear arms, but only if the government thinks that your reason to own a firearm is good or bad. The cops don't follow that rule, or the military, so why should we?
And how about the notion of electronic monitoring? How do you feel about the government doing electronic monitoring of gun transfers? Steve?
I don't know too much about that, so I don't know whether they do it. I mean, as far as if you purchase a gun, I figured there's record of it right there from that dealer. It may be written, it may be not electronic, but it's written. There's documentation if you purchase a gun in Massachusetts.
Would you want them to electronically monitor a transfer of... Well, first of all, are they going to eliminate your right to transfer your gun to a friend of yours? And now making you do this through a gun shop, a licensed dealer. Doesn't that infringe your Second Amendment rights?
Yeah, it does actually.
Because if someone you know wants to purchase your gun, he can't do that, can he?
True.
So he's going to have to go through a licensed dealer. He's going to have to go through an electronic monitoring system.
Mm-hmm.
And does it really help for them to... I mean, the guns that are committing, these people use to commit crimes, these aren't registered guns, are they, Kenny?
Correct. 99.9% of them are not.
They're stolen guns, defaced guns. So does it really help by having all this licensing requirement?
No,
Steve?
I don't think so. I think they're going overboard. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, because obviously we've been doing this for how many years now, and I mean we have these isolated incidents, but overall, I mean, Massachusetts is one of the strictest states. Like we were just talking about Vermont. You look at the ratio there to the guns, and they don't have a high crime rate, and we have more regulations in this Commonwealth. And I don't know the statistics on the numbers as far as deaths or anything like that, but it doesn't seem to be reputable citizens out there killing people. You know, law-abiding people. You mean for Chicago?
Talking a little bit about that, the states actually are kind of all over the place with regard to their gun their gun laws. Some states require that people obtain a license or permit in order to purchase a gun. That's Massachusetts, not so in Vermont. Massachusetts requires an FID card. Some states and localities require that individual firearms be registered with the police. Other states don't. Some states allow some form of concealed carry. Some don't. Some states allow open carry. Some don't. Some states require have a state preemption from any or all gun laws, which means that only the state can legally regulate the firearms. Yeah, the laws vary. Some states have the castle doctrine, or the stand your ground doctrine, which provides a legal basis for individuals to use deadly force when they're in their home to defend themselves, or stand your ground even if you're not in your home. So the states are all over the place with regard to their gun laws, based on the traditions and the customs and the morals and the values of the people in the states, what they're used to, what kind of lifestyle they're used to having. Would your suggestion be, Steve, that the guns, for example, there's an outright gun ban in Chicago, New York, yet that's where most of the gun shootings occur, in these cities. Would your suggestion be that that is more of an economic situation rather than simply requiring registrations and changing the gun laws? Chicago and New York, for example, two cities who have an outright ban yet have high homicide rates. Does changing
I
the
don't think
gun
so,
laws
personally. No,
affect
I
that
don't
in
think
any
so.
way?
Kenny?
No, I don't think gun control is going to matter. Those people that have guns are going to use them wrongly, especially if they're not licensing them. People don't buy guns legally to use them wrongly because they know that the gun is in their name.
So even if it were theoretically possible to ban all the guns in those two cities, would you expect gangs to still
Of course you
Okay.
would.
Oh, sure. It just
Fine.
wouldn't be with gun violence. It would be with pipes, bats, chains, knives, explosives. Now we're going to get into explosives at this point. People are going to start fooling around with the other means.
What's interesting is countries who have had atrocities, meaning bad fighting between government and people, those countries that had gun control are countries that have had the worst killings by government in the world. Whether it was the Holocaust with Germany, China had a problem where the country murdered thousands and thousands of people. If there's gun control in those countries, then people can't fight for themselves. And this is the reason why I believe the government wants to not allow me to have a gun. Am I saying that I'm going to have to protect myself from the government? I don't know, but I believe it's possible.
Let me read you a quote from Thomas Jefferson, from the Jefferson Papers. He said, "No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny in government." So he believed very much that people needed arms to protect themselves generally, and that was by natural right. But he specifically was concerned about disarming the public. And it comes from an English James II in 1689, who decided he was going to ban the guns from the Protestants. And and he was overthrown, and the guns in 1989, they had a code of rights which said that you cannot ban the arms. It's the tyrannical, totalitarian governments that you really run the risk of when you are banning guns. And you bring up a good point. The homicides from Mao Zedong, for example, he had killed, in his 27 years of rule of terror, some 27 million people died in prison and labor camps. Close to 38 million people died of starvation, great famine, total death, about 70 million people attributed to him. About 12 million to Adolf Hitler. Joe Stalin, they attribute at least 6 million people, but that doesn't include all the gulags and the purges. Pol Pot, 1.7 million. Kim Sung from North Korea, 1.6 million. Leopold II of Belgium, 8 million. Massive.
Also, what you're reading is showing the amounts of people that have been murdered by their own people, their own leaders.
People in power, yeah.
People in power. And most of those countries, if you just take Germany with Hitler, the Holocaust, those 12 million that died, they could not own a gun. If they did, we'd probably be talking today that the Holocaust might have still happened, but instead of 12 million, probably under 1 million.
Hitler banned the guns, Mao banned the guns, Stalin banned the guns, and the first thing a tyrannical government, including James II in 1680, was to ban the guns.
So more people have died, and this is not even close, more people have died as a result of government fighting and killing in your own country than any other possibility. But yet, the government that I live under, the United States, doesn't want me to own a gun. And I'm concerned that there's got to be a reason behind why they're doing this, and it has to be what you just read.
And pointing out incidents such as Newtown makes, which you end up with mass hysteria and people being terrified of guns out there. The fact is, in England, where they have an outright ban, they've also had mass killings. In 1987, in Hungerford, England, 16 people were killed, 15 people injured, and the guy committed suicide and then shot just after shooting his dog. And Switzerland, someone killed 14, injured 18 in 2001. In 2010, United Kingdom, Copeland, someone killed 12 people, injured 11, and committed suicide. It happened in Spain, in Sweden, Germany, Soviet Union, 17 people killed, 3 injured, and then he also killed 12 horses. So the mass killings occur everywhere, whether or not there is a outright ban of guns or not. And I think that's what we're beginning to realize, that we have much more to fear by an outright ban or on guns, or even these encroachments with regard to legislation about whether or not you can get 1 gun or 2 guns, or whether or not you can get it with mental health issues or under the influence of medications. These are the issues that we have to deal with, and I think it's good that you're here and to alert the public to the fact that that these concerns are something that everybody, every country, every people has to deal with. And if they deal with them in a way where they ban them and eliminate our ability to protect ourselves from not only each other, but from the government, then we're going to have a problem. We have to be able to exercise our right to defend ourselves. And the framers of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, they were all very much aware of the issue of a central government. And as it is right now, we have a Homeland Security and various other federal agencies who are armed to the teeth. So does that bring more fear to you than your neighbor? But if a coup d'etat occurred or some corruption in government occurred, would you be able to defend yourself
No.
from these agencies if the wrong person got in charge?
Charge of the country.
Put it this way, if they got all this stuff to happen, and they started pulling the Second Amendment rights away from all the gun owners in this country, you wouldn't even see how bad it would be 10 years from now. People would be wishing that they never took the rights away for the right to bear arms, because just what you're saying, back in history, that gives other countries, this country, I mean, we don't know. I mean, everybody wants to think that everything's, hunky-dory out there. But, we just don't know. Why are they emphasizing so much on this? You start hearing other information like the UN. They want us to be part of the UN, but they want to start putting things in there where they don't want the people of this country to have guns. Why? That's where it comes down to. And then you start following other incidents throughout this United States. I mean, why would they want us to really lose our rights to carry guns? There's more to this than what's going to happen. I mean, what we're seeing right now. But if all this stuff gets put into place, it's going to be bad. It's going to be terrible.
Let me read you another quote from Thomas Jefferson, who said, "None but an armed nation can dispense with a standing army. To keep our arms in disciplined is therefore at all times important." What do you think he meant by that? None but an armed nation can dispense with a standing army.
Your friends, your neighbors can at least get together to defend what they need to defend. And if you take that out,
Under the Constitution, there was no standing army. Standing army was allowed for a 2-year period on a provisional basis. They did not want a federal standing army. They were terrified of one. They allowed for a navy, but not an army. The contract for each 2-year term has been renewed ever since. But they did not want a standing army, and they felt that the only way they could defend themselves against a standing army is if everybody was armed, because they were very much afraid of a central government takeover.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen with Hitler, and we've seen with Mao, and we've seen with Leopold II, and all these other countries, this is a real thing. It happened in 1945, it happened in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't we be concerned about this?
oh, that's what I'm saying. You look at the big picture. All these other countries, they don't have the rights anymore. I don't know. I know for sure we are, but I don't know what other countries have that right to have weapons of their own. Like a right to bear arms or whatnot.
Some countries have an outright ban.
Right.
Many countries have
Right.
an outright
And if
ban.
you follow
Mexico
the
has an
history,
outright ban.
if you follow the history,
Mexico is the highest murder rate in the world, and it has an outright ban.
there you go.
So
So who controls the power there? The Mexican government, and that's the way it's going to be. Nobody can, retaliate. I mean, it's very hard to stick up for themselves. They can't. I mean, they don't have any control. The government has the control.
Well, actually, in Mexico, they have 3 major gangs. But the people can't defend themselves.
But are they working
because
for the government?
The guns are out of their hands. They can't defend themselves from these gangs.
That's right.
Much of what happens in legislation has to do with public opinion. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, it's a driving force behind legislation. And when people see horrible things, like Newtown, then their initial reaction is bad. It is to come up with some law which they think is going to stop this from occurring. So, and unfortunately, people easily are swayed. And Steve, I think you had some. You had a.
Yeah, I was listening to one of the AM. It's a local station, and this new radio talk host is named Paul Westcott, and he brought up a couple of issues about Alex Jones. He said that he had one of Alex Jones's associate, I guess, was out in California, and he had a clipboard going around looking for petitions to ban the rights for the rights to bear arms against the people that are doing everything legally. So, and he would approach these people and say, well, we only want the military, the police, and the criminals to obtain firearms. We want to take away the rights to the standing citizens that have, gun rights and gun permits and whatnot. And people were signing this stuff. And it's like, they don't understand. I mean, they're going to allow criminals, because criminals are still going to have the rights to have the guns, even if they penalize us as a gun owner.
Right.
It's not going to stop anybody, but it comes into where the ignorance is. These people don't understand the full picture. They hear a little, like you said, the isolated incident in Connecticut, and that affects their whole picture of everything, because that one little isolated incident. But you look all around the whole United States, it's not out of control. It really isn't. I mean, if you really look, there's more accidents, there's more deaths from other instances than firearms. And then if you look at the gang-related, yeah, I mean, that happens. I mean, we can't get away from that, but those are criminals.
Good points, and I think that's why we're here today, is to try to get the message out to people that they should really be very careful before they try to enact legislation to impinge upon Second Amendment rights, because it's something they're going to have to live with forever,
Yeah.
and it's something that can hurt them. As it did hurt Hitler's Germany, the people there, Mao Zedong, people in China, millions that died there, and in Russia, and several other countries. So we have to be very careful before we try to eliminate the protection that the founding fathers and Thomas Jefferson, they made it number 2, the second biggest amendment, and it was very important to them. Well, thank you very much for coming. We're very happy you came and
Appreciate
great
it.
guests, and I think that's a wrap.
Okay. Oh, you had a clock right there.